Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you all had a great break. I wanted to let you know about something that I've been talking a lot about on social media at Zibby Owens, which is the hashtag 22 in 22 challenge. We are at Zibby Books, we are encouraging everybody, like all of you, to visit 22 bookstores in 2022. And we're going to provide a whole series of incentives for every 5 visits, and you'll be entered to win a $500 shopping spree, and you'll get fun things like bookmarks and all the rest. Plus, you'll be part of a great community of people all helping support bookstores, authors, and more. We're really, really excited about it. If you want to join, sign up. You just go to 22in22.net. That's 22in22.net and click I'm in and put your information. And then every time you go to a bookstore, you just quickly go back on the site and click log a bookstore visit. And then we'll be keeping track and we'll be following up with all of your different achievements and awards and everything. So please sign up, spread the word. 22 in 22, get your friends to join and start visiting bookstores, and it'll be really fun and exciting. So here's to a wonderful 2022. I'm so excited that you're listening to my podcast and doing all the fun things that I have been trying to bring into the world. So here we go, 2022. Hashtag 22 in 22. Jacqueline Friedland is the author of He Gets That From Me, a novel. Jacqueline is the author of the award-winning novels Trouble the Water and That's Not a Thing. She holds a BA from the University of Pennsylvania and a JD from NYU Law School. She practiced as an attorney in New York for a hot second before transitioning to writing full-time. She lives in New York with her husband, 4 children, and 2 very bossy dogs. Welcome, Jackie. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss He Gets That From Me.
Hi, Zibby. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's so neat. I actually was talking to Kyle because I was reading your book and he was like, wait, I remember when we first met her and she was talking about how she was working on this book and here it is. So I don't know, I feel like some sort of investment that we've seen this, come to fruition. So it's exciting.
For sure. It is. It's a long process though. I actually just yesterday was a guest speaker for a high school literary club. And they were asking me about the process to publication. And they were all flabbergasted that they're like, wait, it takes that long. It takes that long to write a book. And then it's another year or 2 years before it comes out or 3 years. They couldn't digest this at all. But I told them it's good to be patient. It's a good lesson in patience, putting books out into the world.
Yes, very, very true. Okay. Can you tell listeners what your book is about, please?
Sure. It is the story of a young woman who serves as a surrogate mother only to discover 10 years after the fact that she accidentally gave away her own biological child.
And how did you come up with this?
So I was working on a different book and I was in very beginning stages and I was procrastinating like you do and reading. I don't even remember what publication. I think it might have been People magazine online. And I saw an article about an American woman who served as a surrogate for a couple from China. And she was supposed to deliver twin babies who were going to be the genetic offspring of this Chinese couple. And when the twins were born, one of the babies looked like the Chinese parents, and the other baby appeared to be Black, like the surrogate's husband. So, all parties involved kind of scratched their heads, but still sent both babies home with this Chinese couple. And I guess, over the next month, everybody kind of wised up to the fact that they should investigate. And it took them a month to figure it out and to figure out that the surrogate had actually gotten pregnant. She had been implanted with embryos and they thought that 2 had attached, but it turned out only one of the embryos took. And then when she was cleared to have intercourse with her husband, she got pregnant again, the natural way. And so the first thing I was like, wait, But if she was already pregnant, how'd she get pregnant again?
Right.
So I'm, immediately on Google and looking this up. And it turns out that this is actually something that happens. It's a thing that women who are pregnant can get pregnant again. It's just so incredibly rare that nobody ever tells you about it. It's called superfetation, and it's a real thing. And they actually think that a lot of fraternal twins may have been conceived this way, and that there's just not really a need to delve into to do all that testing on the pregnant mothers to figure out if, they might have a week difference or in their gestational age or, but it explains a lot like why one twin is often much bigger than the other and things like that. But so I went on Google, found all this out, and then I was just so floored by the entire thing that it really just stayed on my mind. And I got to thinking, what if the families had been the same race? And then they might not have realized, that something was amiss. And what if it had been, what if something happened 10 years later where they found out? And then what do you do when you discover you have a child that you had no idea was out there? And do you take it back? Do you not? And so immediately I was like, I have to write this story. That's how the book came about.
Wow. I love how that's how novelists think. That when, all the what ifs, instead of just saying like, okay, yeah, what if, and leaving it at that, it's like, well, now I have to write a novel about it.
They say, that novelists they have more fear in general in life and anxiety because they go to every what if and they play out every possible scenario. So, the minute you put me on an airplane, I'm a disaster because I imagine immediately all these terrible, crazy things. And
me too. I'm like immediately like at my memorial service and like I've gone the whole route. Who would be left? How would they find out? Like blah, blah, blah. What if this plane? What if that plane? What if on the way back? What if, yeah, I'm like the queen. This I think is why I like love what I do, because every day I talk to people who like share my anxiety and it's like amazing. It's like,
I'm like drafting my eulogy to send to my sister and like, read this at my funeral, sending it from the plane.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm like, well, should I book the place or should I give my list of spots? And, I don't know. Anyway, yes. So the what ifs of the world. But yes, so I thought it was really interesting the way this plot sort of evolved, right? And how it slowly manifested, especially from the point of view of a gay couple, and how when they found out, so for a lot of gay couples who have twins, it's often the case that one is from one guy's sperm and one is from the other. And so they both feel like vested interest biologically in their kids. And so one of the ramifications of finding this out in your book was that one dad ends up not having a biological child and the other dad does. And so he feels sort of alone in that grief because essentially he's just lost what he thought was like the continuation of his DNA and his offspring and all of that. So tell me a little bit about that piece of the puzzle. I found that really interesting.
So, first of all, when I was researching the book, I learned so much about third-party assisted reproduction and all of the different ways that couples and families can be built. And there's apparently, if you have two women who want to raise children together, oftentimes they will take the egg from one woman and fertilize it outside of her body and then implant it in the other woman. So the other one carries the pregnancy, and then they're both equally, vested, and they can both feel like the mother of this child. And there's so many different scenarios like that and different ways that families figure out to include different people and, have everyone be a part of it. But there's also, there's adoption where nobody was involved in the pregnancy. And it got me just to thinking, we as parents project so much onto our children and believe so deeply that, this trait they got from me, this one they got from their dad, this is from their grandmother. And we think we know our kids so well. And, but then you think about like your own parents and how well they think they know you and how much you may think they're wrong. And I really sort of wanted to play on this idea that, the nature versus nurture question may be different than anything that, we've ever thought about. And the way you build a family may be different than anything that we've ever thought about. And so when one dad has a son that he can say, this child is biologically mine, he projects certain ideas onto that child. And when the other dad finds out that neither child is biologically his, he sort of has to question everything and really look into, well, what is it to be a father? And what is it to have a child? And how independent of me is my child, or should he be? And I really just wanted to play with all of those questions. And so that's kind of how it came about.
And the impact between the siblings, which becomes like a really big thing, like how do they feel themselves, right? Because all these paternity and issues that arise, you always are thinking you go straight to the parents, right? But even at age 10, they have their own feelings. 10 years is a long time. I mean,
yes. When I started drafting the book, my entire perspective was really about Kai, the boy who, is genetically not related to the father that he thought he was. And I was looking at it from, what has Kai missed? He has missed 10 years with his biological parents. He has missed 10 years with a biological sibling, with his grandparents, and all with his religion, with his, all sorts of heritage. As I got deeper into the draft, I sort of realized, wait a minute, it's not only Kai who's missed it, it's the parents and the grandparents and the siblings. And, it's sort of like, and maybe Kai didn't miss anything because he got something else where everybody else, there's just sort of a hole where Kai should have been. So, in that regard, I think also the sibling relationship was an interesting way to play with it, because if you think about, like, some siblings especially twins, can really rely on each other and really get close, and in a way that is very different from the parent-child relationship. And so, I think there's a loyalty that often exists between siblings that is unique. And when somebody sort of like attacks your relationship with your sibling, you almost get more protected than you ever would vis-a-vis like a parent relationship. So for me, and also when you write a book, they tell you write what you know. And, I've never had a child through surrogacy, but I know I have 4 kids of my own. So parenting is something I know. And the idea of, having my biological children in my house versus somewhere across the country where I never knew they were was something that I could really sort of imagine and play with. And I also have a sibling who a sister who's a couple years older, who has been such a force in my life. And so I could play on that and, imagine what it would be if somebody told me, actually, you guys aren't related. And so it was interesting, actually, as I've been getting reviews and feedback on the book, a lot of people have said, as a gay dad, this book resonated with me. As a parent, this book resonated with me, all sorts of things like that. But what really meant the most to me was one person contacted me through my website and told me that her daughter, who's in college, read the book, and she's a twin. And that she just was so struck by the book and, looking at the twin relationship and how important it is to twins to have that relationship and that identity. And then when you sort of not attack it, it becomes how heart-wrenching it is. So that was a very interesting facet of the book for me.
Wow. I have twins. I don't know how they would feel. I don't know. They'd probably both be like, okay, you go. You can go to that family. I'll take this family. How old are your kids now, by the way?
I have 17-year-old, 15, 13, and almost 11.
Wow. And what genders are they?
3 boys, and then my youngest is a girl. And my oldest just got into college, and it has completely adjusted my entire perspective on parenting. Everybody says, it goes by in a blink. And all of a sudden, I've really realized he's leaving. And so I've been nicer to all of my children and like, spend time with me, give me an extra hug. All of a sudden, it's hitting me.
I feel like I went through that early when my son went to boarding school at a very young age, and I mourned that. So yes, I feel like by the time he goes to college, I'll just be like, all right, see you later. But no, yes, of course it does. It's crazy. I mean, to be honest, the fact that my son can now like walk around the city by himself and it's like not a big deal, like all of a sudden, that's been like the biggest shock to me. I'm like, okay, you're very hard to decide where you go.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think about. So my oldest can drive now and he'll go out and, he sort of tells me where he's going. I have a general idea, but there's this letting go that's really difficult. And he was getting his license as I was finishing this book. And I was, there's a scene in the book where Maggie, the woman who served as the surrogate, she's in New York and she has left her son with a friend in Arizona. And she calls up her friend to say, how's Wyatt? Do you need me? What's happening? And the friend says, he's fine. He doesn't need you. He's fine. Go do your stuff. He doesn't need you. And when they hang up the phone, he doesn't need you really resonates with Maggie. And she's like, wait a minute. Does anybody need me? And do we as parents need our kids more than they need us? And that's actually something that as I'm watching my own kids kind of get grown and flown a little, I'm really thinking about, it's the same joke you hear about, adults go out to dinner with their friends and show pictures of their kids, but, their kids aren't out showing off pictures of their parents,
No.
So it's an adjustment letting go. I will say that.
I loved Grown and Flown, the website, by the way. Do you read those essays? Oh my gosh, Marydell and Lisa. And the book too, the collection of essays. I feel like that might have been 2 years ago I had them on for that book, but those should come up like every year.
They should. I think it's like, it should be required reading for
It should. Yes, it should. Here is what to expect when you're expecting, and let's jump ahead to when they leave. And that is survive 18 years. Oh my goodness. So when you saw the article in People and you're like, I have to write this novel, what did you do next? Like, what happened, and did you outline the whole thing? Like, and then how long did it all take? Like, what did that whole thing look like?
So I knew the first thing I had to do was research because, I wanted to really get it right with surrogacy. I think that the fact that surrogacy exists is a wonderful thing for so many people. And I didn't want to write the book in a way that might dissuade anyone from ever pursuing surrogacy as an option for their family. And I also just didn't want to get anything wrong because I feel like as an author, you have a responsibility when you're sort of introducing a concept to people who might not be familiar with it or writing, historical fiction, whatever it may be. People think they're learning when they're reading your book. So you have this responsibility to kind of get it as right as you can. So the first thing I did, I happened to have a friend who had a baby through surrogacy and her child is now 17. So when she did it, it was less common than it is today, but she's a very close friend of my family. And so when she did it, and as she's been raising her daughter, I've sort of had a front row seat. So she was very generous and, spoke to me at length about it. And then from there, I met with a woman who runs a surrogacy agency called Growing Generations. And she was so enthusiastic about the concept for the book. And she put me in touch with other people who work at her agency who just not coincidentally, but she specifically chose one woman in particular who served as a surrogate herself 3 times. And this woman then put me in touch with other people who served as surrogates. So I really spoke to a lot of people who've gone through the process. It's been much easier, like where I live, I think there is a geographic component. And where I live, there are many more people who have used surrogates than who have actually served as surrogates. The only people that I have been in sort of like my social circle or my demographic area who I might interact with who've served as surrogates usually do it for someone they know. But the people who just do it, getting paid they're more like in the Midwest and more geographically spread out for me. But the good news is they're really, for the most part, very happy to talk about it. These women who serve as surrogates, for the most part, are these, like, you can't believe how giving and generous they are. They don't do it for the money, and the agencies won't accept women who they believe are doing it only for the money. They do it because they really feel, how important it is to people to have children and that they, for whatever reason, have an easy time being pregnant. They enjoy it, whatever it is. And they just want to give, in some way to other families. And there are people who've done it 3-4 times, after they've had 3 or 4 kids of their own. And it's it's astounding that these, like, putting up with the pregnancy and then, and then giving away the child that they've been carrying for 9 months. And then when they actually collect the payment, it's really, they use it for things that you would be surprised sort of how like frivolous they are. Like they'll go to Disney World or they'll buy like a little, like some new furniture for their living room or whatever it is. Like they really view the money as kind of bonus money. So that was a very interesting part of like learning that was very interesting for me. And also just getting to talk to all these people who are so giving was kind of exciting and fun. And then, I spoke to doctors, like fertility specialists. I spoke to attorneys in the different states where the characters go, because in each state in the country, the surrogacy laws are different. So I needed to talk to people in New York. I needed to talk to people in Arizona, where the book kind of starts out. And then I also, spoke to people in Arizona. So there was, and then, was there any, and then I spoke to parents who have adopted. I spoke to same-sex couples who have looked at all the options and decided not to have children. There's been, it sort of runs the gamut, but it was a lot of fun to talk to all these different people and also to find the common threads in what they would tell me. So that was the bulk of it.
Wow. And where do you like to do your writing?
I do everything at home. I always thought before I actually started writing full time, that I would be one of those writers who like goes to a coffee shop and makes friends with everyone who works there and has my standard table. I can't. The minute I go into a public place, I'm so fascinated by the world around me, especially the people, really. I don't care about the other stuff. But the minute someone walks into a store, I'm like, oh, what's she doing? What's she getting? Who's she getting? Like, and heaven forbid, I can't make sense like, oh, that's obviously like a husband and wife, or obviously like a mother and son. If I see like, a guy who's in his 40s or not with a guy who's in his 20s, I'm like, is that an uncle and a nephew? Is it I'm like building a news story about these people. So
like, is it a job interview?
Exactly.
They work together. They used to work together. Yeah.
Oh, and then maybe it's a college interview. And then I want to
college interview. That's not on my like menu of options.
Could be anything. So,
you're right.
So I stay home, which is generally great for me. It was a little harder during COVID when the height of lockdown, when my husband, who I share an at-home office was here every single day. And I discovered that 95% of his job is talking on the phone really loudly. But I developed a system. I put the earbuds in and I actually started listening. I started with classical music. It wasn't working for me. Lyrics distract me. So I ended up listening to classical Scottish music, which is mostly bagpipes. And it's now this like Pavlovian response. When I hear bagpipes, I get in the zone right away and I'm like writing away. So, but he's back in his office now. So I only have bagpipes twice a week when he works from home.
That is so funny. You would rather be listening to bagpipes blaring away than your husband chatting. Okay, well, whatever. Great. I'm glad you found a way out of that. That's so funny. And how about now? What are you working on?
So I'm at the tail end of another historical fiction novel. I have this bad habit of switching from genre to genre when I write, and I can't seem to stop myself, but I find these stories and I get very, one track mind, like this is the story I want to tell. And when my first book was historical fiction, my next two were contemporary fiction. But when I was researching for the first historical fiction, I stumbled on a story about a runaway slave, a true story, and these two Northern abolitionists who helped this man. And it's a fascinating story that was a national sensation at the time that it occurred. This guy was, a household name. And these two abolitionists, Anne and Wendell Phillips, really did so much for the abolitionist cause. And most people don't know anything about them. And they're really interesting. And so I had to tell the story. And that's what I've been working on.
Wow.
Yes. I was especially excited about it because Anne, the wife, was an incredibly influential abolitionist. And as a female at the time in which she was living, she sort of had to do all of her work through her husband. So it's an interesting story. And that was super fun to research. And almost everything included in the book is like true history down to, the eclipse that happened on a particular date or the newspaper articles that are quoted. So it's been a fun project for me.
And I know you have this like tight-knit group of fellow authors. When did that come about? And like, when did you consider yourself an author, and what's like the importance of the author community to you?
So I think many authors would say they're still, they could publish 12 books and still not consider themselves an author. There's always this like imposter syndrome, fear in the background. But I would say I got comfortable saying I was an author after my first book was published and, out there in the world. One thing when I was a kid and trying to figure out my career and, would in passing say to my mother, maybe I want to be a writer. And she would tell me, that sounds lovely, but, it's so much time by yourself and it's really isolating. And you should think about that because you really like to be with people. And before I was a writer, I was a lawyer. And I have to say that I have made so many more friends as a writer than I ever made as a lawyer. The lawyer job I found very isolating and, antisocial, but it's been incredible to be a part of this author community. I have found that the authors that I come across, everybody is so supportive. There's none of this, competition. And if your book sells, mine doesn't kind of idea. I think if anybody's book succeeds, the book industry as a whole is succeeding, and that's good for all of us. And I think there's an understanding of how hard it is to put your book out there, to put yourself out there, to take these risks. And so everyone is so supportive of each other in that way also. And It's been, I mean, I remember before my first book came out, I went to hear a historical fiction panel, and I just happened to, I just introduced myself to the authors who were on the panel. And then there was somebody's publicist was there, and the publicist who, was not my publicist, was like, oh, you've got to meet this person who is a bookstagrammer, and this one who's another author. And by the end of the night, I had 10 friends, and it's like every day I feel the community is growing, and it's really nice. And I'm actually just about to start a new writing group with a couple of authors who I've, just met through going to things and being with people. And I love the writer life.
That's great. It's true. People A, are so nice, and B, willing to help. And yes, there's this misconception that's so sweet. Your mom said that, because that's something my mom would totally say to me, like worrying about the things.
Yep.
That they perceive. But I feel like when I'm writing, I don't know. I don't ever feel alone when I'm doing it. Like it's like some other thing. It's like you don't worry about feeling alone when you're like in a yoga class or something.
Right.
Or I don't know. It's like a different something.
It's almost self-care. It's like inside your head and sorting through your thoughts. And I agree. And I find
no one's like, I'm worried about you feeling alone because you've been doing so much running.
Right.
Right? Like You're like, no, of course you're alone, but you're listening to music and you're doing this, and like, it's good for you. And, you're not really alone. Even if you're at home on a treadmill, like, I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think it's therapeutic on some level. And, I find it's almost like, charging your cell phone. If that's how I am when I write, when I get up from the computer and go back out into the world, I have much more energy than I did before, spending that time by myself and recharging like that. So, but, I think it's funny, the other thing my mom has said that I keep talking about recently is, one of the main, catalysts in the book for everybody figuring out that there's a genetic situation that may have arisen is that the two dads and their sons decide to do like a 23andMe kind of a genetic test. And so everybody keeps asking me, have I done a 23andMe? And I have not, because my mother has asked me not to. And
what?
So I'm like, wait a minute. If I didn't look so much like both of my parents, I would be really freaked out by this. But she doesn't want me to have my system, the systems to have my information out there. She's concerned that, first she's like, I don't really, the government will know you're Jewish. I'm like, I think that cat's out of the bag. Second, it's bad for identity theft, whatever it may be. So my father did a test, and he's 99.9% Eastern European Ashkenazi Jew, which was no surprise. They actually contacted... As
am I, by the way.
They contacted him like a year. He did it like years ago, and they contacted him after they had sort of like refined their equipment. And I guess they had new information and told him that he was 1% Irish. And I'm like, I knew it. I've always loved Ireland so much. It's sort of, you take me back to the bagpipes, which is not exactly because Scotland, but then they contacted him a year later and they said, no, it was a mistake. He's still just Ashkenazi Jewish.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Maybe there are other guys out there who look kind of like your dad.
Could be. It's been funny. I've been in some Facebook groups where I've been like talking with readers. And if I ask the question, have you ever done a DNA test? And did you find out any surprises? One after another, the comments are, I discovered my dad was really my uncle, or my brother was my father, or the craziest stories. And that's just in these little Facebook groups with, like 1,000 members or whatever it may be. So there must be so many people out there who have discovered crazy things. So, I think it's great for people who like that information. And for me, I've decided to follow my mom's advice and decide that ignorance is bliss, All
right. Well, I don't know. That could be a memoir for you. Let's see what happens.
For sure.
Close to the vest. Okay. Last question. Any advice for aspiring authors?
Yes. I think the most important thing is to write as much as you can and not wait for the best idea you've ever had or the thing that is going to work, and just sit your butt in the chair and get words on the page, because once the words are down, you can edit, you can revise. And sometimes in the way that like talking with a friend may give you an idea and help you think of something, actually putting words on the page may make you think of something that has nothing to do with the words you're writing, that, inspires a whole different story. So I think, if you're not writing, you can't call yourself a writer. So you got to sit down and write.
All right. Noted. All right, awesome. Jackie, thank you. I really enjoyed your book. I loved the characters. The pacing was great. It like moved so quickly and you just kept wanting to like turn the page and figure out what was going to happen. And I was debating what I thought I would want to do in that scenario. Anyway, it made you think and feel and all the good things. So yeah, it was really great.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. I hope to see you soon. Okay.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.